So good afternoon, Paul. So delighted to have you here for one of our TRN interview series. This one is on landing a seat at the CEO's leadership table. And you are uniquely qualified for this interview today, having done that actually. And so I'm super excited. I know we've been talking about this for almost a year now, and here we are. So first, I'd just like to have you introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, Pam. Thanks for having me. I'm Paul Connelly, and I'm the Chief Security Officer at HCA Healthcare, which is a Fortune 100 company. We're not that well known by our name, though. We operate about 185 hospitals and about 2,000 other sites of patient care all around the country. And each one has its own local name, so that's why HCA is not necessarily known that well. And as the Chief Security Officer, I oversee our cybersecurity program, and our Chief Information Security Officer reports to me. And a little bit unique for us also, our Chief Privacy Officer and the privacy program, and our Chief Physical Security Officer and physical security program all roll up under this organization.
Perfect. Excellent. Yeah, I think most people know your organization. So, in this journey, which, I'd love for you to sort of bracket sort of when it started, because I'm sure it's not like on day one you went to the CEO and talked about how the reporting structure should change. I'm sure it was a journey of getting to that conversation almost. So maybe you can talk about sort of that journey and the milestones of that journey to help our viewers.
Sure, definitely a journey, and I would say the journey is still in progress. But I've been here for almost 20 years. November will be 20 years for me, and I started off. I was the CISO. I oversaw a small information security team and reported to the CIO as part of our IT organization. And for the first 10 years, that was the focus. And I was kind of heads down within IT and didn't really have that much interaction with the rest of the business. It was really an IT thing. But over the course of that 10 years, as you know, the world was changing. Information security, cybersecurity became a bigger and bigger business issue. And almost exactly 10 years ago, in 2012, I went to our CIO and said, I really don't think I should report to you. I think I should be separate so that our organization views information security, cybersecurity as a business issue. And that as long as I'm under you, it's always going to be viewed as an IT thing. And they're going to say, it's up to you to take care of it. So that was the first major milestone. And fortunately, our CIO agreed. So we went jointly to our CEO and suggested that we make that change. So that was the first big milestone, was kind of moving us out to be viewed as a business issue. And at that same time, I had been working really closely with the Chief Privacy Officer. And we're both like, gosh, we're all both about protecting information. We do so many things that work together or could be better if we work together. If we're going to move my team out, why don't we merge together? And the CEO, the Chief Privacy Officer, and her boss and the CEO all agreed that it made sense. So 10 years ago, we formed this group called Information Protection. And then a few years later, there was another group called Information Lifecycle Management, basically data retention. And the thought was, well, gosh, they're about protecting information as well. Should they be part of the same group? So they moved over. So this umbrella called Information Protection started to grow more and more. And then the final step was, I guess about 5 years ago, we were having some discussions, and kind of the same sort of realization that I had with the Chief Privacy Officer back in 2012, I had with the head of physical security, that, wow, there's a lot of synergies between our groups. It's hard for us to be successful on my side without you being successful, and I can do things that would help you be successful. Should we be in the same group? And again, we got agreement, went to the CEO. The CEO after some thought, initially did not want to jump down that path because it's, physical security for a hospital company. We're talking about like
Right.
2,500 security guards,
Yeah.
not necessarily something that you want to just jump into. But when you think about access control and insider threats, and there just a number of areas that we could see synergies, plus our side being very IT savvy, we felt like we could really help physical security because IT has become such a big part of physical security. So anyway, I think it was 2018, the CEO decided, yes, let's put it all together. So now we're called Information Protection and Security.
Interesting. So this really started 10 years ago. It was not, and I think interesting point is that you had support all along the way from the CIO, the CPO, the CE, and even the CEO as you're merging these different groups together. And in some of, obviously in a lot of these large enterprises that I work with, a lot of these things have converged. I would say less frequently with the privacy officer, but more frequently with physical security. But I think it's the support of the organization that, would you agree that really helped it all come together, right? Everybody sort of viewed the world the same way you did.
Yeah, it was great. People were open-minded and they were focused on what was best for the organization. There wasn't any, territory protection or anything like that. So I was really fortunate that we just have a culture here that enabled that to happen. And that, our CEO, our CIO, they both were kind of willing to move out of their comfort zone. And
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
on our side, we definitely put a lot of thought into making the case and kind of put our credibility on the line that it was going to work better. So it was a little bit of a risk, but I would say it's definitely worked out.
And all of those steps were crucial to leading up to the conversation you then had, however, a year or so, or maybe more than that ago, when you started to have this conversation with the CEO and your reporting structure. So those steps all had to happen to even have that make sense, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And so then when did you start to have those conversations with the CEO about your reporting structure?
So when we made this change and we brought these groups together under this kind of umbrella that we call information protection and security, one of the questions was, where should it report? And when we first created this organization back in 2012, there really was not a strong case to say it should be reporting to the CEO at that point. So it was set up to report to our senior vice president who oversees ethics and compliance. And so as you said, about a year or so ago,
Mhm.
actually more than that, 3 years ago, I had some conversation with our CEO to basically say, does this still make sense? And just sort of planted the seed that, wow, all these areas have become such significant enterprise risks. Should we be at the same level as others on, the level 2 of the 3-tier risk management model? If you think about internal audit and ethics and compliance and legal, should a group that has privacy, physical security, and cybersecurity be at that same level? So again, our CEO is very open-minded and we had some discussion. And at that time, he was not ready to make a change, but I think it at least registered with him. And then again, about a year ago, we were just having our normal business reviews of our program. I quarterly make updates to our audit and compliance committee. So there's a lot of times that I'm in front of the CEO and the topic came up again and he said, let's go back and talk through that again. And I asked him, could we sort of reevaluate where a lot of things have changed in 3 years. So sat down, had several discussions and didn't get everything that I asked for. That's why I said that I think it's still kind of a work in progress. I'm still reporting to the senior vice president over ethics and compliance. And part of the issue is just how many reports can a CEO have?
Mhm.
And but he did agree that I needed to be at the table for a number of key areas. So our CEO has what he calls his senior team, and stop me if I'm jumping ahead on your
Yeah,
question here, but
I love it. Go for
okay.
it. Yeah.
So he refers to his senior team, and it's members of that group make up the risk committee. They make up the operating committee. They make up the disclosures committee. They regularly give updates to different committees on our board of directors. So what he did was he elevated the role to be a part of his senior team. So I'm on the risk committee. On the his operating committee. As I mentioned, I give just part of the standard agenda. I give updates every audit and compliance committee, an annual update to the board of directors. I meet with our disclosures committee. So the big thing has been just getting that additional two-way visibility where I'm hearing things that are happening, things that are coming down the road in the company sooner, and get a chance to weigh in earlier. And by just being at the table, I kind of feel like I serve as a reminder to everybody there that
Yeah.
we've got to be thinking about privacy and security as we make our strategic plans.
Right. It reminds not, it's this him giving you that seat at the table, literally. It's not just a term, right? It's literally getting a seat at the table. Everybody looks around the room and says, well, we now know where this priority sits with the organization and with the CEO. And that drives change, that drives outcomes, right? So it was less about the reporting structure of being directly to the CEO and more about being part of the leadership team. And how many are on that leadership team?
I think it's about 30.
So yeah,
So you're absolutely right. In addition to the visibility that I mentioned, there's this element of the optics that it clearly sent a message to everybody else on that team that, hey, I'm putting this person or this program at the table, so you all recognize what a priority this is for me, for
right.
us.
Yeah, and also it made the timing was good because all of the different functional groups that you just talked about earlier were already in place. So
Yes.
so super important. Do you have any examples or things that you would share about what made the CEO lean in and give you that seat at the table?
I think it was the recognition of how this risk has grown in
Mhm.
recent years. And we do a big enterprise risk survey every year, and it it breaks down where does each element of leadership in the company view our top risks. So it'll have what the board of directors thinks and what the senior officers think and what the facility CEO, the hospital CEOs think, and what nurses think, and so forth. And this past year's survey, the one that was done about a year ago, every single category ranked cybersecurity in their top 5. And most of them also had physical security in their top 10. So I think that was a really clear message that at every corner of the company, everybody is concerned about what's happening here.
It touches everyone, right? Yeah, right. And if you think about who else has a seat at the table, there's a lot of groups that are functional groups, I should say, that don't touch everyone. So that's a key point, that it touches every corner of the business. Everybody has to think about it. And there's a timing sometimes to this, and you and I've talked about this in the past around sometimes a breach will lead to this type of a change, and so it's sort of inherent. But that's not the case, obviously, with HCA. That wasn't, you were working on this for 10 years. But do you feel like there's a timing that, if an executive is thinking about raising the level of his or her role, that, should it coincide with something? Doesn't have to be a breach.
Well, the way we looked at it was, let's do this before a breach and hopefully head it off. So we certainly referenced other companies where they'd made changes like this after they had the big event. So we tried to emphasize, let's get out in front of this and prevent the big event from happening. And I think that's the way our leadership has looked at it here.
Yeah, that I like that. Before is always the right time to do it, not after, right? That's a good
Yeah.
point. So, having this seat at the table, obviously just even being there creates that awareness. But is there certain things that you've done differently, or how you've levered this role, or can you give an example of how you've levered it? Because I know it's only been a short time, right? A fairly short time.
It's really been over the past year.
Okay.
And gosh, it feels like on almost a just day-to-day basis, I could feel a change almost immediately, just
Um,
in the way other leaders were engaging with our team and bringing us into things in an earlier time frame. Trying to think how else I've would say that I've used it to leverage. Well, going back to what you said earlier, I just think the optics of being viewed as being on the senior team has just sort of raised the way people view not just my role, but the way our team needs to be engaged. So from our perspective, it was really just an important change that it just feels like it's not quite the battle that maybe it had been in the past, just to get involved in things and get people to engage us. Um, I don't want to make it sound like it was, we've got people who are, malicious or trying to bypass us. It was
of
just
course, yeah.
everybody's just trying to move at light speed and do the best they possibly can. And sometimes it's easy to forget things. But when somebody's sitting at the table with your leader, it's a little bit of a different feeling, that just that daily reminder almost.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we want to, and this conversation's been happening now for years about, be part of the business, be part of the business strategy. This isn't the role, of whatever role, whether it's a CISO or CSO or this security leadership role, is really become much more of a business role than it has a technology. So it's a natural part of the evolution, but sewing that into the business strategy and having that conversation, where people are thinking about it and talking to you on a business level rather than a tech level, I would think would be a key difference. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I was just thinking out loud.
No, you're absolutely right. And actually, earlier when I was talking about the milestones, that would have been another milestone I should have included, because initially when we made this change, I was in effect still the CISO, and I also had privacy and physical security reporting to me. And about a year and a half ago, we made the change where we changed my title to CSO and we appointed a CISO. We basically recognized that we need somebody who has 100% focus on the CISO role and not me trying to wear two different hats. So that
Yeah,
was a big step for me. And part of what that did is just as you said, it really gave me an opportunity to elevate, to really be focused on being a business leader, as opposed to being in the nuts and bolts in what's happening in the detailed IT and the cybersecurity work.
right. And is there certain organizations that I mean, obviously your HCA is very well suited for it because it's happened, but are there certain organizations that are better suited? I mean, or maybe sectors like, um, I think about healthcare, for example, because, physical security is such an important aspect, and also privacy, but maybe is there certain companies better suited for this, or is it just would be good for everybody?
I think it would be good for everybody. It's interesting. I have tried to research that, and so to have that information for my discussions with our CEO, and I haven't really found any trends. And it's interesting. At the last big summit of the Health ISAC, I gave a presentation about what we've done and
Yeah.
how we brought physical security together. And when my presentation was over, you know how conferences you finish and there'll be people waiting to speak with you. About 50% of the people were like, I'm dying to do that same thing. Can you tell me how you did this? And then the other 50% of the people were like, I would never want to have to take on
Ah,
physical
it
security.
was divided.
Yeah. So it's,
Interesting.
I
Very
think it just, there's so many different factors that weigh in that tell you what's the best fit for your company. But if you think about what we did, we moved out of IT, we merged with privacy, and then we brought physical security in. I think in a way it's a continuum, and maybe not everybody goes to the very end, but I do think that those initial steps are steps that everybody should be thinking about.
Well, and we've talked about this, but I totally agree, because all of the functions that you talked about are naturally fit together. Where I struggle, and I do see this a lot, is infrastructure, or other parts of the organization coming under, security. I just think it's distracting, frankly. But all the groups that you've talked about is all synergistic, and that's just my opinion. But I think that we are seeing the role grow substantially. And in some cases it's good. And in some cases there's that 50% who think I don't need to be, burdened with infrastructure or some other part of which is, back to your point, technology, right? And not business. So we're raising the level at a business level. So, we talked a little bit about your HISAC presentation, and I know that I get asked a lot by my executives about public boards. And I would think raising the level of this role would help, that longer term strategy of being on a public board. And I wondered if you could maybe, as a final note, because I know we're running out of time, make a comment on that.
I do think that it's part of the inevitable evolution, and I'm going to be really interested to see what the final guidelines are from the SEC. I know they put out that draft about boards having cybersecurity expertise, and they got a lot of pushback on a lot of different things that they said. So I'm really curious to see how it ends up. But if you look at, regardless of what the SEC says, if you just look at the level of risk and how important these things are to almost every company, it seems to me that boards have to have people who really understand this area.
Yeah.
It's inevitable to me.
Yeah, I think the guidelines right now are a little loose, but hopefully they'll tighten up a little bit. It's like anybody who has a technology background almost. I don't know if I'm correct on that, but that's what I've heard from a few folks. So good. We're kind of out of time. I try to keep these, to 25 minutes or less, and I think we're over that. Any final thoughts before we close?
No, well, maybe one last thing. From the beginning in working through this, what I tried to do was look not from my position, but look from the position of the CEO of the company, or the CEO of a hospital, or the head of legal, or the head of internal audit. What model would work best for all of them? And that was part of what drove us down this path. Yeah, there's times where I wish I wasn't responsible for 2,500 security guards, but where would that be in the organization otherwise? And is there another place that's better suited to handle it? In the end, I concluded that there's not. So that was part of it, is, just trying to act on what's best for the organization.
Yeah, makes total sense. Well, thank you so much. I know you're super busy, and so I appreciate you taking the time today. And I'm sure you're going to get some follow-up questions, especially from my group. So I'll pass them your way. Thanks again, Paul.
Sure, happy to talk with anybody about it.
Thanks.
I'm now a prophet of doing things this way.
Yeah.
I sometimes feel.
And I'm honored that you called me when it finally happened. So thank you for that.
Well,
All
we
right.
had been talking about it for like a year, so I
Yes,
had to
we
let you
had.
know.
Yeah,
So.
it's great. All right. Thank you.